Good afternoon, and welcome to Prog Monster on this historic event. Sure. Anyways, it's my first live stream. I know it's a little bright, that's from the window, but I decided that bright is not such a bad thing. Anyways, there's a couple things that are going on here that I wasn't sure was going to make it happen. First of all, we, as many of you know, across our country anyways, we had a cellular issue yesterday, which also affected a lot of the internet, including my own. And so I was thinking it might not happen, but here we are, and it's happening. And you'll just have to excuse me because I did miss one thing that I was supposed to do and forgot completely. Windows have to be closed, otherwise cars going by make lots of racket. So anyways, we're here to do the inaugural episode of Album Cage Match. And I've chosen a couple albums for this. But before I get too far along into it, the other thing is too, the other problem issue I had and wasn't thinking about moving, and I'm going to move it for the next episode, will be at 5 p.m. instead of 12, as there are several people who are subscribers on my channel who are from Australia, and it's about 2 or 3 in the morning there right now. So next time I'm going to do it at 5. This gives them a chance, if they feel like it, coming on around 8 in the morning, during breakfast for them, I guess. So anyways, those are the two issues, and the issues have been solved to my satisfaction. So we're doing, like I said, an album cage match. This is something I thought about for a while, about how to present this and how to do this. I didn't want to just do a battle of the bands type of thing, because then what happens is people drag in all of their other stuff and what this person said and what that person said about the group, and you end up with the most popular group usually winning these things. However, this is an album cage match. This is about the 2 albums. So you may like one of these groups a lot more than the other one, but perhaps you like this particular album more than the one that the group you like. So that's what I'm hoping, that people will, be not biased about this, but think about what album they really generally like. So I chose 2 albums, and we'll present them in alphabetical order, just to be fair. So the first album is going to be this album, Led Zeppelin's 4 album. Some people call it Zozo. I don't really know why. I guess somewhere in it says Zozo. I remember seeing it somewhere. Oh yeah, it's on the album here. But to be honest with you, I've always thought of this as Led Zeppelin 4. It's their quintessential album, one of the greatest rock albums ever released, as far as I'm concerned. So anyways, the vitals about this particular album: it was released November the 8th, 1971, in the Rolling Stones Mobile, which was in Henley Grange, Hampshire, and at Island Studios in London. It's classified as hard rock, heavy metal. Yeah, maybe in the day I would have thought of this as heavy metal. Maybe. But I think if it was to come out now, it would be hard pressed to keep that title, because there's just so much heavier stuff out there. But as one of my subscribers pointed out, if it was heavy metal when it came out, then it's heavy metal to him. And you can't really argue with that logic, because time moves forward. What was often isn't anymore. But this album was a byproduct of the early 70s, and so for that period of time, it was definitely hard rock, heavy metal, and that's, today I'm going to classify it as hard rock, heavy metal. It's 42 minutes in length, a little bit more, which is a bit longer than most albums of its time period. And it was released on Atlantic Records, and the producer was Jimmy Page. Okay. So the second album I'm going to introduce to you is by The Who. Who's Next? So this album released a few months earlier, August the 14th, 1971, same year. Olympic London, England Studios. Star Grove, East Woodley, Woodhay, sorry. I'm always trying to screw this up, in London as well, but that's with the Stones Mobile studio. So they both were released in the Stones Mobile studio, was where a lot of the recordings were done. Both released the same year. Classified as hard rock. I think it's definitely hard rock. It has too many songs on it that aren't as heavy, so it wouldn't pass for a heavy metal album, but pretty hard rock anyways. So they both have that in common. This one's also 43 minutes, almost 44 minutes long, so roughly the same length and time. Was on the Decca label. And in the case, it had 4 producers: associate producer Glenn Johns, and executive producers Chris Stamp, Kit Lambert, and Peter Cameron. So a lot of similarities between these two albums. And what can we say about it? So the similarities between the two albums is obviously they were released at the same period of time, very similar genres, very similar backgrounds. Some of the musicians in this band actually tried out for this band prior to this being a band. So there's a lot of connection between the two. Pete Townsend does not like Led Zeppelin at all, whereas I don't think Led Zeppelin cares because they were considered the #1 band. Okay, so both albums are about the same length as well. Both produced by really good producers as well. The sounds on both of them are very good as well. So I'll talk a little bit about Led Zeppelin first. Actually, we're going to do the group thing first. Okay, I didn't write anything down because I'm very familiar with these bands. Both of them are among my favorite bands. The Who is in my group of 8 now, and Led Zeppelin is not far off of that group and may eventually make it. They're close. So anyways, the vocalists first. So both frontmen, very good frontmen. Which one first? I'm drawing a blank here. Okay, we'll go with, Christ, I can't even remember who. Oh, Robert Plant. We'll go with Robert Plant first. Considered by many people to be one of the greatest frontmen in rock history. And I think they're not wrong. I mean, he's got all that appeal that a frontman has. Like, he's a good-looking guy, great vocals, great stage presence, can really belt out the stuff that needs to be belted out, and has that curly blonde hair. Just he's got everything going for him, and many rock stars emulated him. I'm almost sure of that. The other guy, Roger Daltrey. Okay, Roger Daltrey, I think, has a louder voice on the whole, more suited to singing a lot more because, let's face it, he didn't get a lot of guitar solos, so he didn't get a lot of breaks. He, again, the curly-haired look, the frontman look, the great stage presence, the vying for stage presence with other members of the Who were very much that way. And, he did a fantastic job doing the Tommy thing. I don't think of anybody who could have done that better than him. So you got 2 legendary frontmen here. Okay, so then you go to the guitar players, both also legendary for vastly different reasons. I think Jimmy Page is a guitar virtuoso. The guy is just really good. Great soloing, great instrumentation, like just really good guitar playing all around. And a master of making riffs as well. Great producer and songwriter. I mean, his list of accolades are tremendous. Pete Townsend, maybe not as good in the solo part, but definitely great at riffs and writing music. Fantastic. He may be one of the greatest music writers of all time. in my opinion. I think he is. Great stage presence, very aggressive, just right out there on the edge constantly, and outspoken. There's so many things about the two of them, that are just legendary. Now we get to the drummers, both, of course, again, legendary. John Bonham, one of the great drummers in rock history, with those triplets and all that loud banging that he did. Well, I shouldn't call it banging, that loud drumming. He was the backbone of the sound of Led Zeppelin, if you ask me. Whenever I think of Led Zeppelin, I think of heavy banging, and that backbone of the group is that drumming. Also, he's a great partier, but I mean, he's going up against the best partier in history, maybe, in Keith Moon. Keith Moon, a very different drummer than John Bonham, I think. Very good, solid, but can play. He played between the two, guitar and bass. He played between the two all the time. Just some real interesting beats. He was a crazy individual, and loud and boisterous, and destroying his drum sets and all that stuff and everything that you could. He is a quintessential poster boy for bad rock star, So then we go to the bass players, which are, again, very similar. These bands are so similar. You've got John Paul Jones, who's kind of the quiet man in Led Zeppelin, stays in the background. He plays the keyboards a bit as well. Great musicianship. Great music writer. Very good bass player. A lot of Zeppelin's sound is strongly influenced by their bass as well. John Entwistle, arguably one of the greatest bass players in rock history as well. Could sing as well. He had a pretty strong voice. I like some of the stuff that he sang. Again, quiet, stayed in the background, although he did like to dress kind of loudly sometimes. So, you have a lot of very similarities between these two bands, okay? And it shows up a lot on these albums. So, the next track up, the next thing I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the albums themselves. Okay, so we'll start with, again, Led Zeppelin. It's got 8 tracks on it, and some of the best Led Zeppelin tracks are on this album. Some of them are, and it's going to be the same with The Who. A lot of the stuff is overplayed, and it's overplayed for a reason, because it's so popular. So many people like it. Even people coming into the rock music now are like really liking these two bands quite a bit. So it starts off with Black Dog. To me, the poster song for Led Zeppelin. I mean, they've got lots of poster songs, but this one is, I think, the poster song for Led Zeppelin. It's loud, it's heavy, it's great lyrics. I've heard lots of artists do this song, including like Miley Cyrus did this as well live. So this is a great track. Rock and Roll, another pretty heavy song. It's similar to Black Dog, but not as heavy, I think. And to be honest with you, I think it's just overplayed. I don't listen to it much, just for that reason. It's just overplayed too much. Battle of Evermore, great tune, maybe an underrated tune on this album. It's probably considered the weakest track on side A, and yet it's still a great track. Just fantastic. And then you have Stairway to Heaven, which is the classic song of all rock, not just of Led Zeppelin. Considered to be by many the greatest rock song ever recorded. You can't go wrong with it. It's overplayed again as well, but it is a great tune. Misty Mountain Hop, one of my favorite tracks by Led Zeppelin. Starts off side B, really good. Side B is as good as any side in rock history, really. There's no bad songs on this album. Misty Mountain Hop, love it. Four Sticks, another song, underrated, I think. Going to California has been a song that I've really grown to like a lot more than I did initially. And then, of course, the legendary When the Levee Breaks. And I actually saw Led Zeppelin and Neil Young do this together. Kind of interesting combination there. Just fantastic. So those are the tracks from Led Zeppelin 4. So The Who. The Who, I believe there's one track extra on this album. There's 9 tracks on this album, all really good. Starts out with one of the most famous Who songs of all time, Baba O'Reilly, Teenage Wasteland. Just one of the classics, one of my favorite Who songs. I think it's one of the greatest rock anthems. Lots of people like this song. It's been on TV shows and everything. It's just fantastic. Bargain, another really good, solid, kind of deeper cut track. Love Ain't for Keeping, another deep cut track, really good. My Wife, the song by John Entwistle singing, is very strong vocals here by John Entwistle. The track is one of my favorites on this album. I love it a lot. The Song Is Over. Yeah, great tune. So you've got some like serious songs on that first part. Getting in Tune, underrated song, should be much more well known than it is. Going Mobile is exactly the same. I like them both exactly the same. Legendary track, Behind Blue Eyes. Led Zeppelin doesn't really have a song of this stature on their album. I shouldn't say stature, of this ilk. It's a little bit different than anything they've done on their album, so I don't know if anything is comparable to it, but one of my favorite tracks to sing. Love it all the time. And then, of course, the legendary, one of the greatest rock songs in history, the air guitar and drum song of history, Won't Get Fooled Again. Great live, too. Just fantastic. So, you have, Bubba O'Reilly, Behind Blue Eyes, Won't Get Fooled Again. Those are probably the big tracks versus Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog, Rock and Roll. Those are probably the big tracks on here. But like just so much deep stuff for both albums. Just, crazy. So here's the picture of the two albums together. The Who on the left here, Led Zeppelin here. So I've done everything I can think of doing at this moment. I'm not getting any people, but that's the beginning. It's always the hardest to get people on the first time. So what we normally do, we haven't done this before. So what I'd like to do here is, this show is going to last about an hour every time I do it. It'll be once a month until it either fizzles completely and utterly, in which case I'll stop doing it, or it becomes liked enough for me to turn it into a weekly episode. But for now, we'll do it once a month and see how it goes. So basically, your choice is to vote for Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin's 4, featuring Black Dog, or the Who's Next. Both great albums. Which one of them is going to win in this battle? You got all these elements behind them. Both groups are legendary in my opinion. The Who is, for me, my favorite, one of my favorite bands. So I tend to be a little bit biased in favor of the Who, but Led Zeppelin is considered the greatest, or one of the 2 greatest rock bands in history. The other one probably being the Beatles. But for my money, Zeppelin's probably the better band. But we're not getting into this Led Zeppelin discussion. That's not the issue here. The issue is the 2 albums. Which album is, in your opinion, the better album, or which album do you prefer to be number 1? So if I get anybody, that would be great. But anyways, so those are the vital statistics of both albums. A lot, as you can see, there's a lot of similarities between the 2 albums, almost released basically on top of each other. And for the other thing that I hadn't discussed here, which is that the Who's Next, and Led Zeppelin 4 are I think the favorite albums for those two prospective groups, by their prospective fans. Like Led Zeppelin fans, it's Led Zeppelin 4. The Who fans, it's Who's Next. However, there are, because they both have such great album discographies, there are many things by the Led Zeppelin that some people might like more. I know some people just love Physical Graffiti a lot, or they like Led Zeppelin 2 a lot, you know. And then, of course, the Who is going to be Tommy, right? People that love that Tommy or Who Are You? The one difference between the two bands, that the Who has released albums in the last couple of decades. They haven't released a lot of discs. Like, I think there's only 12 in the discography. Zeppelin only has, so there's another similarity. I think Zeppelin has 10 and they have 12, but they released 2 in this century, where Zeppelin hasn't released anything since in the last 40 years, because rightly so, they retired after the death of their drummer, John Bonham. And, you know, the funny part is both bands have lost their drummers as well. So there's, like, it's just an endless similarity between the two. And I find it odd that that Pete Townsend really doesn't care for the Led Zeppelin, because it's just so much similarity between the two bands. But that often happens, you know, you get two almost identical things and they don't like each other, because it's, I don't know. You try to figure that out. I'm not a psychologist. So I've listened to both of these albums quite a bit. I've probably listened to Who's Next more, because I'm a Who fan. I was a bigger Who fan than I was a Zeppelin fan. But I've been listening to both bands almost since the early 80s, when I started branching out, and Zeppelin and the Who were two of the bands I branched out to. I think the Who came about in my grade 9 or grade 10 class. There was a guy in there who was a big, huge Who fan and played guitar, and he showed me some stuff, and so I started getting into the Who then. I'm not sure how Zeppelin came along. Probably just sheer, I remember what it was. We were supposed to go to see Zeppelin in Montreal in September of 1980, at least 1980? No, September of 79. That's when it was. I think it was, yeah. And then Bonham died, and the concert was canceled, so I never got to go. So I started getting into the band by getting the Into the Outdoor album, which I liked a lot. And so it brought Zeppelin into the fold for me. So that's my history with both bands. And of course, I've listened to a lot of their stuff over the years, periodically here and there, and never ever quite distancing myself from them or just leaving them alone for any length of time. I've always been consistently listening to both bands throughout their history, throughout my history, I guess. There's never been a time, there's never been a time for me where Led Zeppelin threatened to be in my top group, like in my group of 6 or group of 5 or group of 7. It was a group of 7 for a long time. They never really threatened to get in there. I always liked their music, and I always liked the band, but never quite enough to make that level. Where with the Who, I've had periods where I would listen to nothing but the Who for weeks and months on end. And they, in my group of 7, they've been as high as 3rd. And you know, the only thing that kind of hurts the Who from possibly challenging for the best band would be the just lack of discography. They just don't have as much music out there as some other bands, although their live stuff is top of the line. This is another area I haven't really talked about with them, is both bands were fairly good live. Well, the Who were great live. They're considered to me, and by many, to be one of the greatest live bands ever. I'm not as big a fan as Led Zeppelin. I saw The Song Remains the Same. I saw some of their other stuff, and I saw Robert Plant live. I just don't. To me, the word, and this is going to bother some people, but I almost feel like they're overrated a bit. Like people talk about them as if they could do no wrong, and I think they've done plenty wrong. That Live Aid concert was terrible, but they are, without a doubt, one of the most influential rock bands in history. Just about everybody who came after that has cited them as a major influence, especially in the early 70s when they were dominating. The Who, I think they came up and kind of started dominating after Tommy and had some great success in the 70s as well, but more for their live stuff than their actual album stuff. I think if you were to add up all of the Zeppelin albums and all of the Who albums, I think the Zeppelin albums are probably better on the whole. However, I prefer the Who. So there you have it. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about with the two bands is that, it's funny how both lost their drummers, Keith Moon in 78 and then the very next year, John Bonham. Kind of sad, right? And especially at drummers like those two, big influence on the band. I don't think the Who were ever really the same after his death. Kenny Jones was a good drummer, and Matt Starkey's a good drummer. They're both good drummers, but they just don't have that personality, and I don't think you can replace that personality, nor would you really want to, because it just means another drummer going to be passing along. And the same with John Bonham. He was a one-of-a-kind drummer, and Led Zeppelin wisely knew that. They wisely knew that his sound and his style and the band just couldn't perform and be called Led Zeppelin without him. I don't think with that particular band, I don't know that you could take people out of the band and make that band still happen. And it doesn't matter which of the four you take out. Well, maybe you could get away without John Paul Jones, but I doubt it, because the last several albums were majorly influenced by him, because the other guys were having their issues, right? Anyways, where with the Who, you take Keith Moon out of there, and you can put Kenny Jones was a good drummer, but he just didn't do anything for their live show. He wasn't, and nor could he ever compete with Keith Moon, who's considered a legend among drummers. Both these drummers are legends, right? So and it's also funny for those of you who are not aware, but when Led Zeppelin was being formed, both John Entwistle and Keith Moon tried out for the group, tried out to be in the group, and it was Keith Moon that coined the phrase, "This band is going to go over like a Led Zeppelin," which is where they took the name from. So again, there's this tie between the two bands. I know Pete Townsend sees this; he won't agree with me, but the truth of the matter is, there's always been a bit of a tie between these two bands. Both big at the same time, both great albums at the same time, both similar styles, both legendary musicians in the band, both drummers who passed on, both legendary drummers, and both bands. I mean, the Who were on the verge of breaking up before Tommy, members going off in all directions. And a couple of them almost joined this band and decided to stick with the Who. Could have been a very different thing. I wonder if Roger Daltrey could actually sing for Led Zeppelin. That would be different. There is some keyboards on the Who Are You album, and if I remember correctly, there was a little bit of violin. I knew there was something else. Dave Arvis played the violin on that. I'm just looking here. I know there was a violin. There was also something else. Yeah, John Entwistle played a little bit of the piano on My Wife. And Pete Townsend actually did a bit of the synthesizers and organ and piano on Bubba O'Reilly. So there was a little bit of that keyboard element that many of the progressive bands had taken on right away. Now, as far as Zeppelin goes, I'm just going to look here for a second. I don't even think it says anything about it here. The lyrics are good on the Led Zeppelin album quite a bit too, but I mean, is anybody a master over Pete Townsend? I don't really know. I don't think so. I don't see anything about the instrumentation on this. I'd have to look it up, and I don't really want to do that, so I'm not going to. Yeah, so anyways, I don't remember, there might have been some keyboards on here, but there's nothing to indicate that there was. I'm trying to think if there was. I don't think there was on the first side of the album for sure. There might have been something in Going to California, but I think that was acoustic guitar. I don't think it was any other instrumentation. So there's a little bit of a difference between the two bands. There's a little bit more of that on Who's Next. But both albums rock, man. These are two classic, great albums. And what I'm going to do is, because my plan had been to stay on about an hour and then give everybody a chance, and at the end announce who the winner of the classic album were. But because I'm not getting people, because to be honest, I think I started the streaming too early. I should have waited until I built up more of a following first. But I've got people pushing to do this, so got to give the people what they want. Unfortunately, the people that were pushing to do this are the people who were pushing me were in Australia, and they can't make it for this because it's going at noon. So that could be part of the reason here. But I will try to do my next stream at 5, see if that improves the entire situation. Plus, hopefully I'll have more subscribers and more people interested in doing this. And I'll give it a few tries. And then if it's not going to pan out, that's fine with me. I'm not really a live person. I tend to be more of a prep type person anyways. I do have a fairly extensive record collection here. It's not in the thousands like some people have. But then again, I'm new to this, right? I'm still a newbie, so hope you'll cut me some slack as I learn the ropes as we go along. I'm learning pretty good. I've listened to a lot of albums, and probably more than I've ever listened to, and sometimes it's almost so much that you can't really absorb any one album as well as I did when I was a kid, and I would just play when I got this album, I played it to death. Sometimes I play it 4, 5, 6 times in a row, like immediately, so much so that my mother and them would go, "Okay, for Christ's sake, can you just give it a break? I don't want to hear that Who's Next album ever again." Or whatever album is. But it was bigger with the Kiss because I played that Kiss Alive day and night, and my mom and them say, "Okay, we're gonna throw that album out anytime now if you don't quit it." So I've since gone more of the playlist kind of way, where I have, this is my playlist right here, and you'll see that one of them is sticking out. That's the next one in the list to be played, but it's just the first column there, the first row. Those are my playlists with 20 albums. And when one of them comes out of the playlist, I put another one in. That's pretty much how I am. I play about 20 albums a week, and those are the ones I play. And then I throw in new stuff that I got, which is the new stuff is here right now, and it'll fill up to the bottom. And then I do a episode on that once the month comes to an end. I like to be kind of organized that way. These other ones here that you see, these are the next ones from a playlist. So that's what this box is basically for that. And then you'll see there's a small stack. These are albums I'm planning to get rid of because either they're doubles or I've just got new ones, and these ones are a little bit worn. So I'll try to give them away or try to sell them if I can, if that's possible. And then the rest of the stuff is, you can see, is alphabetically centered, except for this corner, right here, you'll see the very far corner. Those are albums that I've gotten over the last few months I haven't listened to yet. Once they get listened to once, they go alphabetically. But I keep them there so I make sure I don't miss out on anything. You know, I can only play so much at a time, as you know. And then my little white thing you see at the top there, that one is just for non-rock albums that I do for my other show or for my Sunday morning episodes. And I like quite a bit of non-rock too, but if you were asking me how much time do you spend listening to rock versus how much time you spend listening to non-rock, I would say it's, if you're doing, say, 100 hours a month, that's just an argument. I might spend 97, 98% of that time listening to rock and only maybe listen to one or two non-rock. And it, of course, depends on my feeling. If I get up and I feel like non-rock, I might play non-rock all day, but that doesn't happen as often as you might think it is. Anyways, the percentage is probably 98% rock, you know. Of that, I would say it's probably 50% progressive, and then maybe 30% hard rock, and then maybe 10% metal, and then whatever the other percentage is, 8% I think is probably other types of rock. And I do like some pop rock, or I don't know what you would call it, just regular rock. One of the guys asked me, what would you call a rock album? And because I had, some of you have seen my recent release of my top 25 hard rock albums, and you'll notice that I've had a couple people say, well, that Tea Party isn't really a hard rock album, but to me it is. But I get their point. There's other influences on the album that maybe take away from the hard rock aspect. But there's, you know, you could say that arguably about the Styx album, the number one album, Pieces of Eight for me. Is it a hard rock album? Yeah, I think it is. I think it's probably more hard rock than anything else, but there's a huge progressive element to it. And some people might say, no, that's a progressive rock. That doesn't sound like hard rock at all, right? You know, it's really subjective, isn't it? You know, I think there's some bands that fall dead center on the hard rock element and we're no problem putting in there at all. Kiss, BTO, AC/DC. These are your solid backbone of hard rock, I think. These three bands, for me, are my backbone of my hard rock. AC/DC has, of course, grown a fair bit for me. You know, I've been listening to them since their Back in Black album came out. That was my introduction to them. Well, actually, my friend had Highway to Hell, so I did hear that first. But I went, Back in Black was the first one I owned, and then I went back and listened to the Bon Scott stuff, which I ended up liking quite a bit more, like a lot more. I'm the only Brian Johnson album that would rate with them would be Back in Black, and that's only because it had an initial impact on me. I still like some of the tracks on that quite a bit, but overall, I would say the Bon Scott stuff is much better. Anyways, we're digressing away from why we're here. Both of these albums, I think, are hard rock, although you wouldn't have many people arguing with the Led Zeppelin album being classified as heavy metal too. I don't classify it that way. There's too much acoustic bits in it for me to think of it as a metal album. So for me, Iron Maiden is metal, but to some of the newer people, Iron Maiden is not metal. It's kind of strange, but you know, and then but for me, mostly the metal bands, it's not just the music alone. Most metal bands have nothing but really heavy stuff, lots of heavy guitar, lots of heavy drums, multiple guitars usually. They have the whole image too, the leather and the black studs and the darkness of the music. Usually faster and screechier and just louder in general. Where you might, with a hard rock bands, you might have some acoustic bits or some, maybe even a ballad or two. You know, however, that genre continues to grow as its fans, legions of fans, tend to grow. Hard rock, there's a narrow gap for hard rock because most hard rock bands have some other elements, whether it's progressive rock or they're heavy metal, or some of them have a pop element to their thing. And I don't dislike pop music at all. Some of my favorite albums to listen to are pop. I like Blondie's Heart of Glass. I've like the Romantics. I like that band when I was younger. I like the Knacks Get the Knack album. I even like Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. And these to me are all pop albums. They're not favorite albums of mine, but I do like them. I like Steely Dan. I've grown to like Steely Dan a lot. So there are bands like that I like as well. But when it comes down to it, my list is pretty much progressive, except for a few bands like The Who and Black Sabbath, who are more heavier element, I guess. Although the Who go across the pop hard rock genre. So, anyways, these are two of the very best albums that I've ever owned and ever listened to. I didn't listen to them today because I just simply didn't have time. Too many things to do this morning. Getting ready for this took a bit of time too. So what I'm going to do is, because nobody's come online, and I guess that's to be expected. It's the first time doing this, so I'm hoping that in the right slot time, I might get a few more people, and then with a little bit more subscription and maybe another set of albums to do, it'll grow in time, hopefully. But it's not going to be more than once a month for a while until I see some kind of interest in it. Some of my videos have done very well. Some people look for certain things from me, and I try to give that to them. Somebody suggested I do the top 10. It was BP. He suggested I do the top 10 favorite songs from the Kiss solo albums, the ones under the Kiss label. I'm going to say it's going to be pretty much dominated by Ace Frehley, because I love that album. It's one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. The other three, I don't even make the top 100, but I don't dislike any of them. I like all three albums. At different times, I like each of them for different reasons. I know people kind of crap a bit on the Peter Criss album, but Peter Criss has that voice, man. He could sing the phone book, I think. He just has a voice. I wished he'd done stuff more like Baby Driver and Dirty Living and that kind of stuff, which it kind of, I think, could have made him a superstar. But he decided to do this kind of stuff that, although good, wasn't going to sell him any seats. Wasn't going to make his popularity rise. But I liked it. Same with Paul Stanley's a little more poppy oriented. Some real love kind of tracks there too. But he has a great rock voice, Paul Stanley, or at least he did when he was younger. And there's 2 or 3 tracks on his album I like a lot. Probably Gene Simmons I like the second most. He's got 3 or 4 tracks on his album I think are really good. And then there's he has the biggest discrepancy, I think, between what he has that's good and what he has is not good at all. There's the biggest discrepancy of the 4 albums there. And then, of course, Ace he's got some off-the-chart songs on that, and then some really good stuff. There isn't really any tracks on that album I don't like. There's a few that aren't my favorites, but I mean, just really good stuff. So I'm going to give the guy what he wants, because that's something that interests me. I'm going to do a top 10 songs from the 4 solo albums. And you're probably going to see dominated by Ace Frehley, but you will get at least 1 track from each of the other 3. I wish they'd done 2. I wish they'd done a second set of these albums, but there was just too many there's just too many issues between them. It would have been nice for them to do a second set of albums instead of wasting time doing like Unmasked and The Elder. And then I know when recent years, people have said the Elder is a hidden masterpiece. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. It's not a terrible album. I don't think Kiss has a terrible album. Well, not that Kiss, not the originals. But they could have spent that time doing something much better. I mean, they came back with Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up, both top shelf albums, I think, really good albums for them. I thought they were done and they came back, so. And the Lick It Up album was much even harder because they didn't have the makeup to back them up anymore. So anyways, enough about that. Just talking about, in general, about different musical topics. So anyways, back to what we were talking about here. We got the Who's Next. Kind of a different cover, eh? When you see a cover like this, the first thing that comes to mind is they're still trying to get that attitude out there. Like, we're rebels. We do what we want. We're a thorn in society. It's almost a punk element to them, right? The music isn't very punky, but there's the whole band has that kind of element of raw, punky attitude towards them. And you see this one, old man with some carrying wood on his back. This gives me a more of a pastoral feeling, although the album is really heavy. But you look at there's even a similar feel to the covers of the albums. Like there's that kind of 70s feel. Whenever I look at these two albums, I think of what it was like when I was that age. I would have been around 7 years old at the time. So I didn't even know them at the time, but it just gives me that entire early 70s feel to them, both of them. So I guess they're a bit dated, but such good music on both of them. These bands were both at their peak at this time. I've gone through different, like the two albums have been around so long that I've gone through different peaks with them. I like the heavier stuff from both albums initially much more than the other stuff, and then gradually I've come down and I'm enjoying the more folky elements of the Led Zeppelin album and the more softer kind of poppy feels of the Who's Next album. Going Mobile being an example of that, or Going to California for Led Zeppelin. Both of those songs I've grown to like quite a bit. I'm actually feeling like listening to them both, so I might do that after this is done. So we got about 12 minutes left. Would be nice if even one person showed up. But I kind of had a feeling this would be the exact response because, I've talked about doing this a few times now and it hasn't happened for various reasons. It almost didn't happen today. But I'm glad I got her done. And I'm hoping that... So what I'll do is, what I'm going to do at the end is, because there won't be a vote, because nobody will vote, is I'm going to leave it open until the very next episode that we do next month, which I will choose 2 more albums for. And then I'll give the vote. I'll give people a chance to vote. So if you come on and you watch the video and decide you want to vote, you can vote for who you want. And then next month, at the beginning of next month, which will be the first week in August. Is this the first week? No, this is actually the second week in July. Yeah. So the second week in August, I'll tally up what votes I have at that point, and then I'll announce a winner at the beginning of the next episode. And I've got a couple of bands in mind for the next episode. I'm going to do a progressive one now. I did a hard rock one. I'll do a progressive one next. A couple of albums in mind here. Yeah, I think there's going to be some interest in this, I hope. So anyways, I hope you've enjoyed doing this live video, or at least you enjoyed, when you eventually do see this video, you enjoyed it. And maybe now that I've done the first one, the next one will be, people will know it's going to happen for sure, and then they'll come and see it. I tried to do it midday, but I realized that the main two of my main people who follow me are both from Australia, so, and they watch most of my stuff. So if I'd done it at 5, maybe if they both would have came on, it would have been at least a bit more of a live event. But again, like I said, I'm not really a streamer, but I'm going to do my best to try and give you at least one. I'll give one a month, and then if it works out, I'll give one a week. But we'll see how it goes. So it's interesting how excuse me. I was noting on when I did the Who's the vital statistics about the Who, and we got to the producers that they have 4 producers, but one of them's an associate. Like, really? You couldn't just label all 4 of them executives, like, or whatever, like, why did one guy have to be different? I don't know. I always wonder about silly stuff like that. People just trying to get that little bit ahead, and it's probably money related, and definitely will be image related for sure. So I'm going to put this down from here now. That I believe, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe with the Led Zeppelin album, all the lyrics were done by Robert Plant, I believe. Let me see. Doesn't really say. Yeah, pretty much it says almost everything has got Robert Plant's name on it, except for, yeah, his name is on everything. So I think he was a lyricist for every song, and that most of the music writing was done by Page, although I think John Paul Jones had a little bit to say even at this stage of the game. He became more prolific later in their career. As for the Who, pretty much dominated by Pete Townsend, both lyrically and musically. John Entwistle doing a little bit here, but not really enough to be a huge impact on the group. But, when you got a guy like Pete Townsend, it's going to be tough for anybody to get in there. It's kind of like the same with when you had McCartney and Lennon. It was pretty tough for George Harrison to get a foothold, although he is a great writer, but he's going up against arguably the greatest pop and rock writer in tandem in history, right? Pretty tough to beat those two. Anyways, it's getting down. I think I may cut it a little bit early. Anyways, I hope you people enjoy this, and maybe are able to come see the video and tell me what you think and which of these 2 albums is your favorite. And like I said, it'll be left open now until my very next video, in which I'll announce the winner at that point, if indeed I even get any votes. But I'm hoping that will happen. I think it will. It's just some people can't get on at this time, and I understand that. So just one more time to reiterate, this is the Who's Next, their 5th studio album in 1971, and Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin 4 album, also from 1971, their 4th studio album. So again, I hope you like. If you did, please like and subscribe. And from Prog Monster, I bid you adieu. Good day.